My sister tried to take my share of the family company and said, "You're not good enough." So I waited until she was out of town and sold the entire business out from under her. My name's Everett, and I never thought I'd be sharing something this raw and ugly with strangers on the internet, but here I am, unable to sleep, with a glass of whiskey and a lifetime of resentment spilling out. I grew up in a small town in northern Michigan, and my family runs what used to be the pride and joy of our town, a lumber company called Evergreen Lumber. This company isn't just any old business. It was started by my grandfather back in the 50s, and the whole community kind of grew up with it. Evergreen Lumber practically built this town. After my dad, Frank, started having health problems, he passed the company down to his 2 children, me and my older sister, Sabina. Now, you'd think this would have been a smooth transition, right? I'd been working there for years, practically handling operations already, while Sabina, well, she was living in New York, making a name for herself, as my mom put it. I didn't mind. I liked the work, the hands-on part of running a family business. Sabina and I used to be close as kids, and I thought she'd come back and want to work with me to keep Evergreen alive. But nothing could have prepared me for the level of betrayal she had in store. "Ev, I know you love this place, but it's outdated," she said one evening when she came home for dinner with the family. "I mean, the paperwork alone is a nightmare. Don't you think we need someone, I don't know, professional handling that?" "Professional?" I asked, trying not to sound defensive. "I've been managing it just fine. I know every in and out of this business." Sure. She nodded, swirling her wine like she was bored already. "I'm not saying you're bad at it, Everett, just maybe a bit limited, you know?" "Limited?" I repeated, choking back my irritation. Sabina leaned forward, putting on her "I'm saying this because I care" face, which I'd long learned was usually just a mask for something more manipulative. "Look, I get it. You stayed local, took some business classes at that state college, and that's admirable. But this is serious money we're talking about, and I know how these things work on a larger scale. Trust me, Ev, I just don't want you getting in over your head." I bit my tongue. Sabina had gone to a fancy college out east, joined some high-end finance firm in the city, and now she was back, with her neatly pressed pantsuits and a condescending smirk that hadn't been there when we were kids. I kept telling myself she was just trying to be helpful, but as the weeks went by, I started to see a side of her I'd never seen before. It started small. I'd get to the office in the morning, and Sabina would already be there, flipping through paperwork, shaking her head at various documents. One morning, I walked in to find her sitting with a middle-aged man in a suit, slick, polished, the kind of guy who didn't look like he'd ever worked a day in his life outside a corporate office. "Oh, hey, Everett," Sabina said casually, barely looking up from her laptop. "This is Felix Harmon. He's a financial advisor I used to work with in New York. He's going to help us with some, let's say, restructuring around here." I was taken aback. "Restructuring? Since when do we need that?" "Since we realized our profit margins have been slipping for the past 5 years, she replied in a flat, rehearsed tone, as if she'd prepared for this question. "Felix is just here to make sure we're running a tight ship. Isn't that right, Felix?" Felix gave a slight nod, glancing at me like I was an uncooperative toddler. "This company has a lot of potential," he said, his tone as smooth as butter, "but it's not being managed to its full capabilities. A few adjustments, and you'd be surprised at how quickly things can turn around." I swallowed hard, feeling my cheeks burn. "I've been handling the books for years. There's nothing wrong with them." Sabina's smile was tight. "Everett, don't take this the wrong way, but you don't have the kind of experience we need to make this business grow. You're great with the day-to-day stuff, really, but some things are beyond your skill set." It took everything in me not to explode right there. "Skill set? Sabina, I've been running this place since you were off playing stockbroker in New York. I know this company inside and out. I know every employee, every contractor, every client." She shrugged. "That's nice, but relationships don't pay the bills, do they?" From that moment on, she treated me like an obstacle. Every decision, every little change, she pushed them through without consulting me, with Felix always lurking in the background, his smug smile adding fuel to the fire. She even went so far as to rearrange the office without telling me, swapping out desks and bringing in modern, sterile furniture that made the place feel more like a dentist's waiting room than the family business I'd grown up in. The breaking point came one morning when I walked into the office to find Sabina sitting in my dad's old chair, going through paperwork with an intensity that made me feel sick to my stomach. "What's going on?" I asked, barely able to keep the edge out of my voice. "Oh, Everett," she said, her eyes lighting up with that fake, patronizing concern she'd perfected. "I was just going over some transfer documents." "Transfer documents?" I repeated, frowning. She nodded, clasping her hands in front of her, like she was about to tell me the family dog had died. "Listen, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. I think it would be best if I took on the full responsibility for Evergreen. I mean, I already have the experience, the contacts. You understand, right? Full responsibility?" I asked, my voice shaking. You mean you want to buy me out? She sighed, looking at me with what I can only describe as pity. I mean, that's one way to put it. I'm offering you a very generous deal, Everett. This way, you don't have to stress about keeping up with the business, and I can make sure things run smoothly. I stared at her, completely at a loss for words. I'd spent my entire life in this company, worked from the ground up, built it with my own two hands. And now she was trying to take it away from me as if I were some kind of incompetent burden. Sabina, I said slowly, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach, this is our company. Dad left it to both of us. She gave a small laugh, waving her hand like I was missing the point. Dad left us an opportunity, Everett. And I'm just trying to make sure it doesn't go to waste. You're good with the routine stuff, really, but we both know you don't have what it takes to make Evergreen successful. Not in today's world. I felt a rush of anger so intense I could barely see straight. You don't get to decide that. Her expression changed, her face going cold and hard. Actually, Everett, I do. I've already had Felix draw up the paperwork. All you have to do is sign, and this can be easy. But if you're going to fight me on this, I'm prepared to do what's necessary to protect the company. Believe me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own sister, trying to force me out of the family business that was supposed to be ours. And what was worse was the absolute certainty in her voice, as if she'd been waiting for this moment, planning it. No, I said, my voice steady. This isn't happening. You don't get to waltz in here after years of being away and take over everything I've worked for. She gave me a long, level stare, the smile slipping from her face. Everett, she said, her voice low and dangerous, you're out of your league here. You can either take the money I'm offering you or be left with nothing. Your choice. I couldn't even find the words to respond. I just turned and left the office, my mind racing. Sabina was trying to push me out, and she had every intention of doing whatever it took to get what she wanted. And that's when I knew, if she was going to treat me like an obstacle, then I'd become one she'd never forget. I spent the next few days in a daze, replaying Sabina's words over and over in my head. Out of your league. Just sign, Everett. I'm offering you a generous deal. Generous? As if she were doing me a favor by shoving me out of the business I'd practically built from the ground up? And Felix, always lurking in the background, a snake in a suit who'd slithered his way into my family's legacy. The thing was, Sabina underestimated me. She thought I'd just sign the papers and slink away quietly, as if the company meant nothing to me. But if she wanted a fight, she was going to get one. I started by digging into the financial records Felix had been handling, quietly going through every line item, every transaction. And it didn't take long before I found it, a few minor discrepancies at first, small sums being funneled into obscure accounts. But then I uncovered more, larger amounts that were being siphoned off into a private account. Sabina's account. It turned out, she'd been preparing for this takeover for months, bleeding funds from Evergreen to make her move. And what's worse, Felix had helped her set it all up. Armed with this information, I knew I needed to play this smart. I'd need help, and there was only one person I could think of, Hector, our operations manager who'd been with the company since before I was born. I invited Hector over to my place one evening and laid out everything I'd found. You're telling me Sabina's been funneling company money? He said, his eyes widening. Not only that, I replied, my voice low, she's trying to force me out. She's planning to take full control and leave me with nothing. Hector was quiet for a long moment, and then he shook his head, a fire in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Your father would be turning in his grave, Everett. This company was built on trust, on family. She's betrayed everything we stand for. Together, Hector and I came up with a plan, a risky, elaborate plan, but the only one that could truly give Sabina a taste of her own medicine. First, I needed to keep Sabina and Felix in the dark, so I played along. I acted defeated, downtrodden, as if I'd accepted my fate. I even started showing up late to the office, letting her think I'd given up. Everett, she'd say with a smirk when I walked in at noon, finally decided to join us? Yeah, I'd mumble, barely looking at her. Just didn't see the point of getting in the way. You're handling everything so well, after all. And she bought it. Every word. She'd smile, as if she'd won, while Felix would just look on, pleased with himself. They had no idea what was coming. Then, I reached out to an old acquaintance, someone who'd expressed interest in buying Evergreen years ago, a man named Victor Hayes. He ran a sustainable woodcraft business out of Wisconsin, the kind of guy my father had always respected, someone who genuinely cared about the industry and wasn't just looking to make a quick buck. I explained my situation, and after some negotiation, Victor was on board to buy Evergreen, but only from me. And I had just the way to make sure that happened. The final part of my plan involved Sabina's precious business trip. She had a wedding to attend in New York, a weekend she'd been looking forward to for months, and Felix had agreed to join her for some networking. That gave me a window, an opportunity to pull the rug out from under her. The moment Sabina and Felix left town, I sprang into action. I met Victor at my lawyer's office, armed with every document I'd need to finalize the sale. Hector, bless him, had gathered all the necessary records and personnel approvals, giving me the full authority to sign on behalf of the company. Legally, Sabina was out of luck, her assets were tied up in other ventures, and her part in the company wouldn't even be considered until we completed an official transfer of ownership, something she'd been too confident to finalize. The next few days were a blur of signatures, meetings, and legal hoops, but by the end of it, Evergreen Lumber was officially sold to Victor Hayes. The best part? Sabina and Felix had no clue. On Monday morning, Sabina walked into the office, dressed to the nines, looking like she'd just won the lottery. "Felix," she said, waving him over, "I want you to start drafting the press release. Evergreen Lumber is about to enter a new era." Felix smirked, flipping through his notes. "Already on it." I stood up from my desk, clearing my throat. "Sabina, Felix. Good morning." They both looked at me, surprised to see me there so early. Sabina's smile faded, replaced by a look of irritation. "Everett, we're kind of in the middle of something. Can you give us a minute?" "Actually," I said, struggling to keep the grin off my face, "I think you'll want to hear this." Sabina raised an eyebrow, glancing at Felix as if to say, "This should be good." "All right, go on," she said, crossing her arms. I held up a document, the official sale contract, complete with signatures and seals. Evergreen Lumber was sold last week. Sabina's face went white. "What are you talking about?" "I sold it," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "Victor Hayes is now the owner of Evergreen Lumber. Effective immediately." She looked at me, horrified. You what? You can't just sell it without my approval." "Actually, I can," I said, nodding to Hector, who had walked into the room. Dad left the company in both our names, but with full executive powers to whichever of us could bring majority shareholder backing. Which, with Hector and a few others. Well, that was me. Felix, who had been flipping through his phone, stopped cold. "But that's impossible. We were just in the middle of a deal. You didn't have authority to sell." "Oh, I absolutely did," I replied, enjoying the shock on both their faces. "See, while you two were too busy counting your hypothetical millions, I was actually paying attention to what was going on around here. It's all legal. Every last bit of it." Sabina's face contorted with fury, her mouth opening and closing as if she were trying to find the right words. Finally, she spat, "You snake. This was our company, Everett. Our family's company." "Funny, that's exactly what I thought," I replied, my tone sharper than I'd ever dared to use with her before. "Until you tried to cut me out and take everything for yourself." She looked like she might scream. "You don't understand what you've done. I could have made Evergreen huge. And now you've destroyed it." "Actually," I said, smiling for the first time in weeks, "Victor's going to keep the company just the way it is, with the same values Dad built it on. He's even keeping the employees, unlike what you were planning with Felix here." Felix tried to regain some control, attempting to sound confident. "Well, we'll see about that. This isn't over, Everett. I'll take you to court for this." I chuckled. "By all means, go ahead. Just know that I've documented everything, every transfer, every unauthorized adjustment you made. Feel free to explain those to a judge." Felix fell silent, his face ashen. Sabina's voice was barely a whisper. "You'll regret this, Everett." "Maybe," I replied, feeling a calm satisfaction wash over me. "But I doubt it. You see, Sabina, I didn't need to make Evergreen huge. I just needed to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. And you were the worst hands of all." Without another word, I left the office, feeling lighter than I had in years. I'd saved my family's legacy, and I'd saved myself from a lifetime of being bulldozed by the very person who was supposed to stand by me. And as I walked out the door, hearing Sabina's furious voice fade behind me, I couldn't help but smile. For once in my life, I had won.